10 Stages of Change, the podcast where we confront the darkest side of human history to illuminate pathways of hope and action. Written and created by Josh Bicknell, writer, educator, and researcher, deeply passionate about understanding how genocide unfolds, and more importantly, how we can stop it. Together, we'll journey through the complexities of genocide and human rights, exploring the 10 stages of genocide model with 10 case studies as a lens to understand the past, make sense of the present, and envision a better future. Each case study corresponds with a blog post or article, the audio reading of that article, and resources you can access at stagesofchange.org for each stage and for any age. We'll uncover untold stories, expert interviews, analyze key moments, and connect the dots between history, literature, civic action, and technology. This isn't just about learning, it's about doing. This podcast is for anyone who believes in the power of knowledge to transform the world and the willingness to act on it, because awareness isn't enough. Action is what prevents history from repeating itself. Together, let's build a better future, stage by stage, story by story, and change the narrative toward a world without genocide, once and for all. Human Quotas, Persecution and Consumption in the Genocide of Xinjiang's Uyghurs, by Josh Bicknell, published July 5th, 2026. Please note, the following article contains descriptions and narratives of violence and genocide, as well as an analysis of human behavior relating to sensitive topics, including racism, intolerance, religious persecution, forced sterilization, sexual violence, physical violence, the death of a child, and death. Some descriptions and details may be disturbing or upsetting to listeners. Please be mindful of the content before continuing. Visit Mental Health America's site for information on mental health, getting help, and taking action. Persecution is the 8th stage of genocide. The case study is the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region of China, where, since 2017, an estimated 1 million or more Uyghurs and other Turkic Muslims have been held in a network of camps and prisons, and where the United States and several parliaments have determined that the People's Republic of China is committing genocide and crimes against humanity. One, Sydney Marlowe, Apartment 4, B, Somerville, Massachusetts, Tuesday evening, February 6th, 2024. In her second year of graduate school, while completing a degree in environmental policy at Tufts University, Sydney Marlowe, 29, admits she has been struggling with procrastination since the program began. "It isn't that I don't enjoy the work," she says, her legs hanging halfway over the futon she managed to afford on an adjunct graduate salary. "I think it's just one of those things where you get online to work, or to study, and it's impossible to avoid that temptation." The temptation she refers to is, unsurprisingly, social media and shopping. And the temptation is real, and perhaps more frightening, it is universal. One need not sit at the epicenter of misinformation or propaganda to feel its pull. One site in particular, though there are several of the same variety, has her in a choke hold, as she calls it, laughing nervously. "I hate admitting it, but yeah, it's Temu," she says. Temu is one of the more recognizable storefronts of the Chinese-founded retail giant PDD Holdings, which also owns Pinduoduo, and it is certainly not the sole operator. Shane functions as a close competitor. It's 8:53 p.m. on a Tuesday evening, and with her literature review half finished, she's earned her scroll time. She opens Temu. The front page resembles a Ross, a Marshalls, and a Goodwill with a shared identity crisis, all crammed into one awkward but somehow miraculous digital space, with even greater variety and, on second glance, astoundingly cheaper prices. Solar outdoor lamps, leather slippers, a women's engagement ring, teal bamboo bed sheets, a denim patchwork jacket, and a magnetic screen door, all under $7 each. For Sydney, it's a set of 4 throw pillows and a blue linen blouse with a scoop neck that catch her eye and end up in her cart. The blouse is listed at $5.49 and has 4.6 stars across 2,347 reviews. It's a lightning deal, and a bright red timer counts down in the corner of the screen. 9:12, 9:11. With only slight, perhaps feigned reluctance, she buys the blouse and the pillows. And, at the last minute, 2 pairs of sunglasses listed "Buy one, get one free" under the label "Local." I mean, let's be honest, it's super cheap stuff, but you'd be surprised how much you can still spend, she says, closing out of the site and pulling her literature review back up. The delivery is estimated for February 18th to 22nd, as announced in the confirmation email. There is something almost cryptic about the whole process, though it isn't immediately apparent why. Something behind the cheap floral tops and the high-top Converse knockoffs that never quite hold any sort of white to begin with. When asked about the lengthy shipping window, she shrugs. It comes from China or something, but I guess that's all retail now. I think it's cheaper because of the longer shipping time, but I'm not sure. I've never thought about it that much, to be honest. And there are solid reasons she has never had to. At the time of Sydney's order, under Section 321 of the Tariff Act of 1930, a provision known as the de minimis exemption, packages valued at $800 or less could enter the United States without customs inspection or formal documentation, and, in practice, without any meaningful screening for forced labor. Laws barring the import of goods made with forced labor applied to these packages on paper. There was simply no one looking. In the fiscal year of Sydney's purchase, more than 1 billion such packages entered the country. Each one, legally speaking, was too small to matter. Roughly 2 weeks later, the package arrives on February 19th. The blouse fits beautifully. The pillows bring light and texture to her living room. The sunglasses don't fit, but she shrugs. Their stuff is so cheap, it's not worth returning or really giving a second thought to. Again, an uncomfortable laugh. A sense that something feels off. That's kind of the good thing about this stuff though, right? You can't really go wrong with it because tossing it isn't really losing anything but, what, a few bucks? She slides the blouse onto a hanger and puts it away in her closet, admiring it as she steps back. But this, she says, it's perfect. 2. Gulzar Awul-Khan-Kizi, or Awul-Hen, Uyghur Tribunal, London, September 13th, 2021. 6 hours, 8 minutes into proceedings. The province of Xinjiang can appear artificial at first glance, something one might expect to see on a postcard or even on a computer's wallpaper. Surrounded by high mountains and divided by the Tian Shan Range, which separates the Tarim Basin of southern Xinjiang from the Jungar Basin of the north, it is a province of contrast and extremes, featuring the Turpan Depression, one of the lowest and driest places on Earth. Although Xinjiang is generally not the first place that comes to mind when thinking of China's provincial-level units, it constitutes roughly 1/6 of the entire land area of China. For scale, it is roughly the same size as Iran, while sharing expansive borders with 8 countries, including Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India. Perhaps even more unexpected is the human geography of Xinjiang, given its scale. It is here, in Xinjiang, where the largest concentration of Muslims in China resides, particularly in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, home to Uyghur Muslims. The Uyghur population alone is roughly 12 million, 11.62 million by China's own 2020 census. They are unique in that they speak their own distinct language. Uyghur is a Turkic language, and its fusion of Persian, Chinese, and Arabic reflects centuries of contact across the region, serving as lexical evidence of Uyghurs' historical presence in Xinjiang, a presence that has been repeatedly contested and, in some cases, punished by the Chinese government. They have practiced Islam since at least the 10th century. In mid to late 2017, a number of human rights and civil society organizations became increasingly vocal about the persecution of Uyghurs in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region of the People's Republic of China. By 2018, there was widespread international attention as the United Nations received an increasing number of these allegations. As growing numbers of Uyghurs continued to disappear between 2017 and 2019, the Chinese government initially denied the existence of internment or detention camps. Then, as evidence of the camps emerged, officials acknowledged detaining individuals, but described them as terrorists and an existential threat to the People's Republic. When questions arose about conditions inside the camps, often hidden from outside scrutiny, the government responded with official narratives describing vocational training centers and re-education programs. These were framed as opportunities for education and employment, where residents were said to have a choice between incarceration and re-education. At the same time, the government emphasized job creation and training programs for teachers, though the content of what was being taught and the specifics of the facilities were often unclear or untranslated in external reporting. This combination, restricted access to the region, state pressure on released detainees not to speak, and tightly controlled information, left significant uncertainty in public understanding of the extent of abuses. By 2020, however, global attention shifted dramatically for another reason entirely. Roughly 2,500 kilometers to the east, in the Hubei province city of Wuhan, a novel coronavirus, which most published research attributes to zoonotic spillover, though the question of its origin remains contested, spread rapidly through China and eventually internationally, becoming a global pandemic. What followed were waves of xenophobia, paranoia, and violence against Chinese and other Asian people worldwide, as rhetoric such as China virus circulated in political discourse. The world's attention narrowed, and in many places, sustained advocacy regarding Xinjiang diminished. But detainment of Uyghurs did not slow. If anything, scrutiny decreased. By 2020, leaked official records reported by BBC and other news organizations described arrests for a wide range of behaviors, including downloading apps, wearing face veils, entering mosques, growing beards, using VPNs, downloading religious videos, having more than the legally permitted number of children, possessing passports, traveling abroad, having contacts in designated sensitive countries, of which there were 26, mostly Muslim majority, communicating with relatives overseas, thinking unusually, visiting people for unknown reasons, turning off cell phones, using back doors to enter or leave homes, purchasing excessive food or gasoline, fasting inconsistently during Ramadan, possessing Uyghur literature, being born after 1980, failing to watch state television, speaking Uyghur instead of Mandarin, being related to someone previously detained, having grandparents with strong religious beliefs, attending funerals, or displaying excessive emotion. These restrictions were described in official terms as part of lawful governance and security policy. In practice, they functioned as a system of surveillance and criminalization of everyday life. But the camps, as many accounts would later describe, were worse. Enter Gulzire Awulkankizi, or Aulhan. Born in Gulja in 1979, Aulhan emigrated to Kazakhstan in 2014. In July 2017, she crossed back into China at the Kyrgyz border checkpoint to visit her 10-month-old daughter. Her passport was confiscated at the border. A local official, a Uyghur she notes, told her not to worry. She would only be studying for 15 days. She was detained in 4 facilities over the course of 437 days. It is September 2021 in London, and Jeffrey Neese, formerly the lead prosecutor of Slobodan Milosevic in the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, announced the tribunal's creation a year earlier, stating there was no other way of bringing the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, to judgment. The goal was to document whether genocide or human rights violations had been committed in Xinjiang. By February 2021, the tribunal's panel had been finalized. Witnesses were called afterward. One of these witnesses is Aulhan. In her testimony, counsel questions her about conditions inside multiple camps where she was detained, including her role as a cleaner and later a glove maker in a larger textile operation tied to forced labor. Aulhan's testimony takes place 6 hours and 8 minutes into the day's proceedings in London. A large screen projects her image. She sits upright in front of a camera and ring light, a red background behind her repeating the words, China Aid. Her posture is rigid. Her dark hair is pulled back into a low bun, revealing high, defined eyebrows that remain slightly furrowed throughout her testimony. She is attentive, but after speaking in her Kazakh language and hearing her words translated into English, her eyes occasionally drift downward. There is a subtle shift in her expression, something between fatigue and resignation. The following is extracted from the transcript documents and footage of her examination, condensed for brevity, but otherwise unedited. Counsel. When you were in the second camps, you served as a cleaner. Can you please tell the tribunal what you witnessed? Owlin. When I was in the second camp, I was kept in shackles for 6 months. They even took me to see my family with the shackles on. After the 6-month period, they removed the shackles from me. They made me the cleaner. I saw that Uyghur women were brought to that room, and they were raped. I had to wash them afterwards. I mostly stayed with the Uyghur women. I would hear them scream and shout and beg for help, but no one would do so. I was responsible for not just cleaning, but taking care of the whole area, so I saw all the instruments they would use to torture people, like tiger chairs, the chains and shackles and all of that. I was involved in taking those women to shower and helping them shower, and I always noticed how they had those blue and red hematomas on their bodies, on their hands and legs mostly. Counsel, how do you know that the men who were visiting those women paid for that service? Ulhem. While I was in prison, I had to clean some of the premises. Once I came there, and there was a man standing in the room, and I needed to wash the floor, so I asked him to move slightly away so I could clean the area under his feet. He said, I paid to come here, and that is why I will stay wherever I want to. He was Han Chinese, but interestingly enough, he spoke Kazakh to me. Speaking Kazakh was very rare because even the teachers that we had in the camp spoke Mandarin to us. They would say, you are here to learn the language, not to speak Kazakh. Counsel. In your statement, you stated that you were regularly beaten. Can you explain how you were beaten and how often, and whether you were ever tied to a tiger chair? Alhan. The most frequent punishment came whenever we had to use the toilet. The classes lasted for about 14 hours, so that is 14 hours we had to spend sitting, and we would be given 2 breaks of 2 minutes each to use the bathroom. Sometimes it would take us longer than 2 minutes, so they would come and beat us on the head. The excuse was that because we were women, we should not be injured on our body. That is why they would hit us on the head with their sticks. Also, once they tied me to a tiger chair for covering for one of the older Uyghur ladies. She had to use the bathroom, but she took a bit longer, and they claimed that she did ablutions, washed herself, as if it was a prohibited ritual. They punished her for it, and they punished me as well for allowing her to do so. They tied me to the tiger chair for 24 hours. In fact, throughout those 15 months, I was interrogated 19 times, and each time I would be taken to the tiger chair. I believe in each of the camps where I would be taken to the tiger chair 5 or 6 times. Also, when they transferred me to the factory that produced the gloves, I sent a photo, and as a punishment for sending that photo, they sent me in isolation in a sort of 20 meters deep well. They used electric currents on me, they poured water on me, and they kept me there for 24 hours as well. Counsel pauses, checks the record, and moves to the next line of questioning. It concerns the gloves. Three. Sydney Marlowe, Student Center Cafe, Tufts University, Somerville, Massachusetts, March 2024. Sydney makes it a point to arrive by 9 a.m. to the lower level of the Student Center, a busy but cozy cafe and common meeting place for grad students like Sydney to sip coffee and enjoy acai bowls while absorbed in conversation or a new stack of research. Her literature review is in the developmental editing stage, she explains, scraping the remaining raspberry jam from the bottom of the acai bowl she picked up that morning. She shivers and picks up her coffee. I probably don't eat enough, she says. I get unusually cold even when inside, even with coffee. So I try to force myself to eat breakfast every day, even though I'm so not a breakfast person. After discussing her literature review at length, cuts she's made, last-minute additions, she recalls the blouse when asked how her shipment has held up. You know what, she says laughing, I haven't even worn it yet. I'm not sure what I was thinking. I mean, it's like, 30 degrees out? She continues, opening her laptop and darting her eyes left to right as if to make sure she has permission, or that she at least isn't being watched. That reminds me, Speaking of Temu, I've got to get some winter wear to last me through the freezing temps here. It's hell, or hell frozen over. She clicks through the web page quickly, not casually as she did before. Now, there is intent. First, a scarf. $3.99. Good enough, she says. Next, a pair of gloves. And these, she says, adding it to her cart. And no, I don't feel guilty about this buy, she chuckles, because I genuinely need these for this weather. And with a total of... She pauses, waiting for the final screen to load. $7. I don't think it's worth even debating. She buys the scarf and the gloves. Hopefully they get here faster than the last one, she says. 4. Adrian Zenz, Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, May 2022. In May 2022, Adrian Zenz, a German anthropologist and senior fellow in China, studies at the Victims of Communism. Memorial Foundation received 10 gigabytes of data that would become some of the most widely cited digital evidence regarding detention camps in Xinjiang. The files contained internal records suggesting a system extending beyond re-education or release. The file structures became known as the Xinjiang police files. An anonymous hacker had breached the internal networks of multiple public security bureaus in the counties of Konacheher and Tekes. For months, organizations including the BBC worked to authenticate and cross-reference the data before an international consortium of 14 media outlets published it simultaneously on May 24, 2022, timed deliberately to the day the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights arrived in China for a long negotiated visit. Meanwhile, official messaging continued to downplay the discovery, even as scrutiny of the facilities increased. The government described the centers as places of reform, safety, and education. The files described something else entirely. Across the files, 2,884 detainees appeared in photographs, with some appearing disoriented, restrained, or badly injured, and in one image, a basement cell shows a group of men in identical blue uniforms facing a television, while a guard stands nearby, hovering over the group while holding a wooden club. In others, officers in riot gear practice strike drills on detainees, kneeling with their hands cuffed behind their backs. In the photos, detainees ranged in age from 15, a girl named Rahile Omer, to a woman of 73. According to accompanying records, some were listed for offenses such as listening to speeches, studying religion decades earlier, or being related to someone previously detained. One man's file cited a crime committed in the 1980s. He had been interned, the records state, for who he was at a time when most of his fellow detainees had not yet even been born. A police manual included in the files outlines procedures for handling escape attempts, one warning shot followed by a directive of shoot to kill. The broader directives long associated with the campaign, including Xi Jinping's show no mercy rhetoric, given through internal speeches after his 2014 visit to the region, and the order to round up everyone who should be rounded up, had surfaced earlier in two separate 2019 leaks known as the Xinjiang Papers and the China Cables. What the police files added was corroboration. They also added some basic arithmetic. In Konacheher County alone, the records indicated that more than 12% of the adult ethnic minority population was in a camp or prison in 2018. This amounts to roughly 1 in 8 adults. It's evident that internment at such a high rate is indeed not a response to individual behavior, but rather a quota being met, a target. Beijing went on to casually dismiss the files as just the latest example of anti-China voices trying to smear China. This was not new, as Zenz himself had already been sanctioned by the Chinese government a year earlier, alongside other researchers and institutions studying the region. Somehow, the punishment of documentation itself took precedence over punishing the atrocities being documented. What is missing from the files, however, is the human impact, and for that, there are witnesses. Five. Mihirgul Tursun, Congressional Executive Commission on China, Washington, D.C., November 28, 2018. Room 255 of the Rayburn House office building, with its wood paneling, name cards, and glasses of untouched water, gives an immediate sense of bureaucracy. Mihrigul Tursun, at the time 29, the same age as Sydney, sits at the witness table with a written statement in front of her and an interpreter beside her. The hearing is titled, "The Communist Party's Crackdown on Religion in China." Tursun has been in the United States for 68 days. She begins with a thank you to the United States government and the American people for saving my life. As she narrates her story, she starts form before the camps, where at 12, she recalls being taken from Shenzhen County to Guangzhou under the Xinjiang classrooms policy, a state program that moved Uyghur children to boarding schools in inner China as far as possible from their language, their families, and of course their faith. It was there, she testified, surrounded by Han classmates who treated her as a sort of anomaly, that she first understood she was different. She went on to study economics, and in 2010, she left to study in Egypt, where she met her husband, and in March 2015 gave birth to triplets, 2 boys and a girl. 2 months later, exhausted and grateful for her mother's offer of help, she flew home to China with her 3 infants, a fulfilling life she assumed lay ahead. But, she tells the commission, she was wrong. My troubles began the moment I set foot in China. At the airport in Urumqi, she was pulled from the border control line and interrogated for hours. There, her babies were taken from her before she was handcuffed. A dark sack was placed over her head, and she was driven to a detention center. She was not permitted to see or breastfeed her children. After 3 months passed, the authorities told her she had been paroled because her children were sick. Immediately, she went directly to the hospital to find her oldest son in critical condition, visible only through a glass window, too far away for her to tell whether he was breathing at all. The next day, they handed her his body. He was just 4 months old. The doctor said he had been unable to breathe. All 3 infants, she discovered, had undergone operations on their necks while she was detained. Feeding tubes, they said, though the babies had breastfed without difficulty while in Egypt. Her surviving son and daughter have had health complications ever since, and her daughter required eye surgery shortly after. While burying my 4-month-old baby, she testified, I was tormented and filled with the guilt of not being able to save my son. No investigation, death certificate, or funeral rites were allowed to follow. Her grief, in essence, was regulated too. She could not even leave. Her documents had been confiscated, and her identity card now carried a black dot that beeped at hospitals, pharmacies, bus doors, and every checkpoint of ordinary life, announcing her as a flagged person. She would be detained twice more. The 3rd time, in January 2018, she was stripped, examined under a machine by officials while naked, and dressed in a blue uniform with a yellow vest bearing the number 54. A Chinese official explained to her that the outfit was usually worn by criminals facing certain death, and that 54 in Chinese also sounds like I am dead. She was placed in cell number 210, an underground room with no windows, a single light always left on, and cameras covering every corner including the open toilet, with 40 women crammed inside. By the time she left 3 months later, there were 68 women, her neighbors, the daughters of her former teachers, a doctor educated in the UK who had once treated her. The women were forced to sleep only in rotations, with 10 to 15, standing at a time so the rest could lie down curled on their sides. She recalls how they were forced to take unknown pills and drink a white liquid. Guards checked their mouths with fingers to confirm swallowing. Some women stopped menstruating while others bled profusely without stopping. Still, every day before breakfast, the breakfast of rice water, they recited together, "Long live Xi Jinping, leniency for those who repent, and punishment for those who resist." Again and again. The interrogation room, with its 1 light, 1 chair, and belts and whips on the wall, is where she later had her head shaved for the maximum impact and a helmet placed on her skull. This was the tiger chair. Each time I was electrocuted, my whole body would shake violently and I could feel the pain in my veins, she testified. I thought I would rather die than go through this torture and beg them to kill me. The interrogators told her that her mother had died, that her father would serve a life sentence, that her son had died in the hospital, that her daughter's eyes would remain crossed forever, and she would be thrown into the streets. Your family is torn apart because of you. Over the course of 3 months in cell 210, she witnessed 9 deaths. Gulnisa, 62, whose trembling hands and rashes the camp doctors were required to pronounce healthy and who went cold in her sleep after a night spent crying over lines of Chinese she could not memorize as a requirement of the camp. Patemhan, 23, whose crime was attending a 2014 wedding held according to Islamic tradition, where all 400 guests were arrested, and who collapsed one night and was dragged out by her feet by people in masks, never to be seen again. If my small cell, cell number 210, in a small county, experienced 9 deaths in 3 months, she told the commission, I cannot imagine how many deaths there must be all over my country. The Chinese government disputes her account. State media later produced hospital records, aired interviews with her relatives, and insisted her children are alive and her detention never happened. The interviews, however, are telling. Her brother, for example, sits alone in an isolated room with a placard in front of him, his eyes wide and his face without expression, his accusations cold and dry. One can almost feel the hovering of an official standing over him. Mihrgul has repeated her testimony under oath and on the record in Washington and in a sworn statement to the Uyghur Tribunal in London. And still, her brother, in a voicemail she played for reporters, urged her to walk into the Chinese embassy and recant, otherwise China can get you wherever you hide. At the end of her testimony, she recalled asking the authorities during one of her detentions what her crime actually was. They answered, "You being Uyghur is a crime." Six, final round. It is tempting to think of persecution as an escalation, a hatred grown hot enough to boil over, but history often shows otherwise. By the time a genocide is showing violent levels of persecution, hatred has already been formalized. Looking at Stanton's description of the 8th stage of genocide, victims are identified and separated out because of their ethnic or religious identity. Death lists are drawn up. In state-sponsored genocide, members of victim groups may be forced to wear identifying symbols. Their property is often expropriated. Sometimes they are even segregated into ghettos, deported into concentration camps, or confined to a famine-struck region and starved. Persecution is the last stage at which prevention operates at scale. Both after and alongside persecution exists extermination, a climactic point in which victims have been identified, concentrated, and already stripped of any protections. Intervention is no longer about saving the vulnerable. It is about preserving the lives and memory of survivors. Still, we can see clearly the elements of persecution at work in Xinjiang with painful accuracy. Identification in the Integrated Joint Operations Platform, a policing app documented by Human Rights Watch, which aggregates surveillance data like facial recognition, phone spyware, electricity usage, and, as previously mentioned, even which door of the house a person uses, all to flag individuals for detention. Expropriation and separation. Uyghur land and businesses have been transferred or shuttered completely. An estimated 16,000 mosques have been damaged or destroyed across the region, according to satellite analysis, and hundreds of thousands of children have been placed in state boarding schools while their parents sit in camps. The result is a generation raised by the institution that detained their families, and the consequences of such an upbringing we've yet to see come to fruition. And then, a measure Stanton excludes here, but that is a crucial element in understanding the determination of genocide in Xinjiang as a whole with regard to the UN definition of genocide. Detained women, like Olhan, who have described injections after which menstruation stopped completely. Outside the camps, Uyghur women have been subjected to mass IUD insertion, sterilization, and abortion under threat of further imprisonment, or imprisonment of their families and taking of their children. The evidence for this is clear. In the 2 largest Uyghur prefectures, birth rates fell by more than 60% between 2015 and 2018. Across Xinjiang, They fell 24% in 2019 alone, against roughly 4% nationwide, a massive red flag for any humanitarian organization. In December of 2021, once the Uyghur tribunal delivered its judgment, it was this: the deliberate suppression of births that carried its finding of genocide. Genocide, in law, does not require mass murder. The UN definition explicitly states that imposing measures intended to prevent births, such as through sterilization, fits the legal definition of genocide, as does the forcible transfer of children. Not to mention, of course, the forced assimilation through 14-hour or longer classes taught by threat of death, permanent imprisonment, communal punishment, or torture and sexual abuse. Important, too, is the level of intense secrecy behind the walls of Xinjiang prisons. Forced labor exists both within and outside those walls, but within them, so too does torture, humiliation, cultural erasure, and disproportionately high numbers of deaths, of which estimates are likely on the lower end due to lack of access to accurate records or facility exploration. The tribunal declined to find mass killing on the evidence before it, and said so plainly. That is not a concession. A recurring theme in these case studies is the practice of perpetrators waiting and watching. We may have yet to see the most violent phase of Uyghur elimination, and optimistically, it's at least encouraging to consider that some of the violence may have been slowed by international outrage and the Uyghur tribunal, for example. But genocide is not solely a pile of bodies at the end of a sudden outburst. It is a system that can destroy a people while producing almost none. A system, in other words, with quotas rather than massacres. 7. The quota economy. 20 gloves a day. Of all the numbers in Alhan's testimony, 437 days, 19 interrogations, 24 hours in the tiger chair, it is the production quota that connects her world to ours. Because the gloves did not stay in Xinjiang. They told us that those gloves were exported to America or to European countries, she testified, noting that the camp has a clear output. The scale is difficult to grasp at first. Xinjiang produces roughly 85% of China's cotton and about a fifth of the world's. By some industry estimates, 1 in 5 cotton garments on Earth contains fiber from the region. It produces a comparable share of the world's polysilicon, the raw material used in solar panels, and a third of its tomato paste. A tipping point was reached when the United States responded on paper with one of the strongest trade laws it has ever written. The Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, signed in December 2021, presumes that any goods made in whole or in part in Xinjiang are the product of forced labor and bans them, unless the importer can prove otherwise. Unless, that is, the package was small enough that no one ever looked. This was the genius of the direct-from-China retail model that captured Sydney and tens of millions of shoppers like her. A container of blouses entering the port of Los Angeles was subject to the UFLPA's presumption. The same blouse, shipped alone in a gray poly bag to apartment 4B, entered under the de minimis exemption. No inspection, no import documentation, no questions. In 2023, a congressional investigation found that Temu and Shein alone were likely responsible for nearly a third of the roughly 1 billion de minimis packages entering the United States each year, and that Temu maintained no system whatsoever for ensuring compliance with the forced labor ban. Temu's own disclosures did not dispute it. The company's purchase agreements simply required sellers to promise they were behaving. It took until May 2025 for the exemption to be eliminated for Chinese goods, and until that August for it to be suspended for the world. Forced labor and fentanyl cited side by side among the reasons. By then, the model had already reshaped American consumption. The average de minimis package was worth about $50. Sydney's gloves were worth $7. In this sense, the logistics of the piece closes its loop. Alhan testified that in her month and a half in the factory, she sewed more than 2,000 gloves. For this, she was paid 220 yuan, about $30. Council did the conversion for the panel, roughly 1 cent per pair. 1 cent for the woman with the steel needle, $7 for Sydney. The difference is the discount. A caveat, and it must be said honestly, there is no way to know where Sydney's gloves were sewn. No consumer can trace a $7 accessory through a supply chain deliberately built to be untraceable. But that is not the reassurance it sounds like. It is the design. A system in which no single purchase can be proven complicit is a system in which every purchase is safe for the buyer. The persecution, meanwhile, remains astoundingly cheap. 8. Actions against persecution. Below are specific actions you can take now, in your community, and to support Uyghurs at home and abroad, and to resist persecution in all its forms, and the victims already succumb to its escalation. Check your solar panels, not just your closet. Xinjiang produces a huge share of the world's polysilicon, the raw material in most solar panels sold in the US. If you're shopping for solar, or your city or churches, ask the installer for the manufacturer's name and cross-check it against the UFLPA entity list at cbp.gov before signing anything. This is a 5-figure purchase most people never think to screen, unlike a $7 blouse. Delete one app for 30 days, not as activism, as data. Uninstall Temu or Shine for a month and notice what happens, what you actually needed versus what a countdown timer talked you into. The point isn't guilt, it's seeing the mechanism Sydney couldn't see because she was inside it. Track the entity list itself. CBP updates the UFLPA entity list periodically. Companies added and occasionally removed, often after lobbying. Skim it twice a year. A company quietly coming off the list is a policy story almost no one covers. Noticing is a form of accountability that costs you 10 minutes. Send one specific letter, not a form letter. Instead of a generic support human rights email, tell your representative you want to know the current CBP staffing and budget for de minimis inspections, specifically. Vague constituent mail gets a form response. A funding question gets logged. Learn what a tomato label can't tell you. U.S. law doesn't currently require country of origin labeling on many processed tomato products, and Xinjiang supplies a large share of the world's tomato paste. You can't audit this one at the grocery store, which is exactly why it's worth knowing exists. Some things on this list you can act on. This one you just have to carry. Give Atatürk a task, not just a donation. Atatürk Kazakh Human Rights, the group whose public pressure helped get Alhan released, runs largely on volunteers who translate testimony out of Kazakh and Uyghur. If you have language skills, even basic ones, email and ask if they need help. If you don't, a recurring $10 does more for a volunteer-run org than a one-time $100. Put December 9th on your actual calendar, not Remember Uyghurs as a vague annual intention. The specific date the Uyghur Tribunal delivered its judgment. A calendar reminder that fires whether or not you're thinking about this today is worth more than good intentions in March. 9. Gulzir Aulhan, Uyghur Tribunal, London, September 13th, 2021. Final minutes. Before the panel releases her, they ask one last question. Panel, we will draw this to a close. But is there anything that the witness wants to add? She could rest. She has given enough, they said. Still, she adds this. Alhan. Another thing that they did to us in one of the 4 camps in 2018, they would make us go to the buckets. They would not have proper toilets. Through the small opening through which they would send us food, they would throw us Qurans. They would say, here is your book, go and read it. And once you grab the book, they would make you throw it in the bucket and make you do your thing on top of the Quran. The people that they try to re-educate are Uyghurs or Kazakhs, and the rumor has it that this camp will continue to exist until 2026. Panel, thank you. The screen goes dark. 5 more years have passed. Welcome to Sydney's thesis defense. Another caveat, however, if it wasn't already obvious, Sydney is fictionalized. She represents the casual nature in which we collectively toss our textiles to the side, purchase the latest bargains without a thought of where they originate and at what cost. She represents the educated, sometimes graduating from elite universities in prestigious programs with genuine care for the environment and the world around her, while the mechanisms of persecution work maliciously in the background, depending on Sydney, on all of us, to buy the thing anyway. So here we are in Somerville or Houston, Los Angeles, Canada, or London. It is 2026, the year the whispered schedule from Alhan ran out, And still, the camps did not close so much as change, on an administrative level of necessity. Many were converted into formal prisons holding formal sentences, and the persecution has since transformed, shape-shifted, and morphed into a legal system with meticulous planning that no longer needs euphemisms like re-education at all. The beds, as far as anyone outside can tell, are still never empty. The persecution of Uyghurs adapts strategically with increased awareness and scrutiny, and they will likely face an ongoing battle for justice and independence. As emphasized before, the stages of genocide are less like stages and more like vertices interviewing to create something far more violent. Still, what the 9th stage looks like from here depends in part on what the watching world will do while still inside the 8th, in the throes of genocide itself, before the final and total annihilation of a people and their culture. 10. Mihrigul Tursun, Virginia, present day. Today, Tursun lives in Virginia with her son and her daughter, the 2 children the state told her she would lose, now growing up in a country their brother never reached. They are afraid when someone knocks at the door. This is true. But, Mihrigul reflects, they are also alive, and in school, and more than anything, they are hers. She gathered her courage, she said, and decided to tell the world about the camps, so the voice of those innocent people in the camps could be heard, where any sentence she speaks in public is paid for by fear for her parents and siblings. My people look to the United States as the beacon of hope for the oppressed people around the world, she testified earlier. And then she made a request, speaking softly between tears. If any member of Congress goes to China, please ask where my mother, father, and siblings are. Please, ask where they are. Aulhan, 5,000 miles away and 3 years into her own life after the camps, was never granted a congressional hearing, only a tribunal with no army and no subpoena power, one that could rule genocide, but still never make Beijing answer for it. What she got instead was a volunteer network, Atatürk Kazakh Human Rights, the group that turns testimonies like hers into public campaigns until an embassy or a border guard finally lets someone go. Pressure like that is part of what got her out, she realizes. Today, she lives in Kazakhstan again. She still tells the story when someone asks, because the quota system was built on the bet that no one would. But she's also learned to live for her children. 2 women, 2 hearing rooms, 2 continents, but ultimately the same sacrifice from each. In her final words, Tursun testified, "I never thought I would come out of cell 210 alive." She looks up, and while I still cannot believe it, I see that miracles do happen. To learn more about the ongoing genocide against Uyghurs in Xinjiang, or the 10 stages of genocide, visit genocidewatch.com/10 stages. Thank you for listening. Follow the stages at stagesofchange.org.